He used to bring home such obviously worthless promises, as if they were great triumphs, and it was a torment to see him behind Amalia's back, twisting his face in a smile and opening his eyes wide as he pointed to her and made signs to us that her salvation, which would have surprised nobody so much as herself, was coming nearer and nearer through his efforts, but that it was a secret and we mustn't tell. Things certainly would have gone on like this for a long time if we hadn't finally been reduced to the position of having no more money to give him. Barnabas, indeed, had been taken on meanwhile by Brunswick after endless imploring as an assistant, on condition that he fetched his work in the dusk of the evening and brought it back again in the dark. It must be admitted that Brunswick was taking a certain risk in his business for our sake, but in exchange he paid Barnabas next to nothing. And Barnabas is a model workman. Yet his wages were barely enough to keep us from downright starvation. Very gently, and after much softening of the blow, we told our father that he could have no more money, but he took it very quietly. He was no longer capable of understanding how hopeless were his attempts at intervention, but he was wearied out by continual disappointments. He said, indeed, and he spoke less clearly than before, he used to speak almost too clearly, that he would have needed only a very little more money for tomorrow, or that very day he would have found out everything. And now it had all gone for nothing, ruined simply for lack of money, and so on. But the tone in which he said it showed that he didn't believe it at all. Besides, he brought out a new plan immediately of his own accord. Since he had failed in proving his guilt, and consequently could hope for nothing more through official channels, he would have to depend on appeals alone, and he would try to move the officials personally. There must certainly be some among them who had good sympathetic hearts, which they couldn't give way to in their official capacity, but out of office hours, if one caught them at the right time, they would surely listen. Here, Kay, who had listened with absorption hitherto, interrupted Olga's narrative with the question, "And don't you think he was right?" Although his question would have answered itself in the course of the narrative, he wanted to know at once. "No," said Olga. There could be no question of sympathy or anything of the kind. Young and inexperienced as we were, we knew that, and father knew it too. Of course, but he had forgotten it like nearly everything else. The plan he had hit on was to plant himself on the main road near the castle, where the officials pass in their carriages, and seize any opportunity of putting up his prayer for forgiveness. To be honest, it was a wild and senseless plan. Even if the impossible should have happened, and his prayer have really reached an official's ear. For how could a single official give a pardon? That could only be done at best by the whole authority, and apparently even the authority can only condemn and not pardon. And in any case, even if an official stepped out of his carriage and was willing to take up the matter, how could he get any clear idea of the affair from the mumblings of a poor, tired, aging man like father? Officials are highly educated, but one-sided. In his own department, an official can grasp whole trains of thought from a single word. But let him have something from another department explained to him by the hour. He may nod politely, but he won't understand a word of it. That's quite natural. Take even the small official affairs that concern the ordinary person, trifling things that an official disposes of with a shrug, and try to understand one of them through and through, and you'll waste a whole lifetime on it without result. But even if father had chanced on a responsible official, no official can settle anything without the necessary documents, and certainly not on the main road. He can't pardon anything. He can only settle it officially, and he would simply refer to the official procedure, which had already been a complete failure for father. What a pass father must have been in to think of insisting on such a plan. If there were even the faintest possibility of getting anything in that way, that part of the road would be packed with petitioners. But since it's a sheer impossibility, patent to the youngest schoolboy, the road is absolutely empty. But maybe even that strengthened father in his hopes. He found food for them everywhere. He had great need to find it, for a sound mind wouldn't have had to make such complicated calculations. It would have realized from external evidence that the thing was impossible. When officials travel to the village or back to the castle, it's not for pleasure, but because there's work waiting for them in the village or in the castle, and so they travel at a great pace. It's not likely to occur to them to look out of the carriage windows in search of petitioners, for the carriages are crammed with papers which they study on the way. But, said Kay, I've seen the inside of an official sledge in which there weren't any papers. Olga's story was opening up for him such a great and almost incredible world that he could not help trying to put his own small experiences in relation to it, as much to convince himself of its reality as of his own existence.